Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, birthright citizenship stands. Also, what will the Alabama Supreme Court do? And we celebrate 250 years of the American Republic.
I came to America in 1914 by way of Philadelphia. That's where I got off the boat. And then I came to Baltimore. It was the most beautiful place you've ever seen in your life.
Happy birthday. Let's just work to keep it. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by Susan Britt, research guru extraordinaire, and Josh Moon, columnist and investigative reporter at APR, and currently at the happiest place on earth, Disney World.
Yep. That's right. Or this faux room behind me with all of my books that I've definitely read.
Yes. Well, we couldn't get Mickey or Minnie to cooperate, so
that's no, they're busy. They're busy mice.
They are busy. They are very busy. We just celebrated 250 years of our country, and 250 years is actually a very long time for a republic to survive, and we have, and we celebrated it. We had parades, we had fireworks, and that is all absolutely appropriate. But also at 250 years, we need to make clear that this is a country founded on an idea, the idea that of self-government, no king, and the idea that all men were created equal. So, for 250 years, Susan, we have been trying to get the country to live up to the very promises it made. Black Americans, immigrant Americans, poor Americans, all Americans have moved this country forward from what the promise was. And we still have to take an account, because it didn't end in Yorktown or begin and end in Yorktown. It is still happening. It happened at Seneca Falls. It happened at the Edmund Pettit's Bridge. It happened at Stonewall. It happened at courtrooms, houses of prayer, and in the streets, and sometimes in the fields of battle. This is a great time to look at the real America that was founded by wealthy white men with an idea that revolutionized the world.
I think it's important that we were listening to a gentleman the other day. I think it's important that people understand that the men that signed the Declaration were very, very wealthy men, very comfortable lives, knowing they signed that document with so much commitment that they knew they would probably, and most of them did, lose everything they had. Even some of them were captured and tortured. They destroyed their homes. They destroyed their families. I mean, these men, but they had so much of a commitment to this ideal, to this idea, that they were willing to sacrifice all of that to give us what we have today. And I think it's really important in all of this that's going on, especially right now, that we remember that we remember what kind of commitment they made to what we have now, and that we honor that.
And I agree. Josh, I also believe we honor the founding fathers and the Constitution and the Revolution by also saying that it was a promise that excluded a lot of folks, but they didn't accept the exclusion. It's like a house that they weren't invited into, but they knocked on the door and said, let us in.
Yeah, I get continually amazed at people who take such offense to someone saying that the founders were flawed people. And they were, they were,
yes, absolutely.
They had a great idea. Okay. They did relinquish power. They didn't grab power. Also a lot of their ideas were based upon self-enrichment and how to better enrich themselves and to not pay taxes without representation or without other things. And so there were some things that they had definite self-interest in doing these things. These were all very wealthy men, and a lot of them were ignoring clear instructions from the king about where to develop and not to develop and all these things in this new world that they were in. But also, they were flawed in the sense that they created this all men created equal country without creating all men equally, without treating all men equally.
Right.
And so, but what I've always thought was the greatness of America was, number one, the relinquishing of the power personally. But number two, setting this thing up, the first thing that they did was add amendments to the Constitution. And it demonstrated this, hey, look, you're going to have to make this thing continually better and better and better as you go. And that's what we've been allowed to do if we chose to do so. Now, we've gone backwards a couple times currently. Yeah. We've gone backwards this past week, as a matter of fact. But, I think that we have the opportunity. That's the greatness here, is we have the opportunity to move and progress forward if we choose to do so.
And the people that were excluded in the beginning are the ones who have worked so tirelessly to expand the rights of all Americans. The women's movement, mm-hmm. the civil rights movement, mm-hmm. these have all been testaments to that. This was a dangerous revolutionary idea. I want to move on real quickly. We don't have a lot of time. One of the things that the Supreme Court did this week that was very American is to reestablish the 14th Amendment, that birthright citizenship cannot be overturned by a president with executive order. It cannot, and that it says what it means what it says. And I was so disappointed in Alabama's Republican delegation. So many of them came out and said, oh, there was a terrible ruling. When this ruling has stood since the Civil War, Susan, but they chose to take the side of a renegade president and a renegade idea. And the court, the Supreme Court of the United States of America, said, no, it will stand.
Yes, let's not forget that all of us would not be citizens, including them, had this not been in place, because our ancestors, most of us, are not from here. So it's absurd to think that this is not a right you should have. It's just insane.
Well, my family's been here since 1735, but I'm no more American than the one that was born yesterday to a
Absolutely.
Migrant mother in Alabama. But anyway, we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
Your property is your home, your investment, and your legacy. Across the country, scammers are filing fraudulent deeds, often without the owner knowing until it's too late. REACT is a free alert system. If a document is filed using your name or tied to your property, you'll be notified within 24 hours.
Property fraud is a crime, and the faster we know it, the faster we can act.
Sign up today. Protect your property, protect your legacy.
Alabama has a hands-free driving law, and that means you can't hold your mobile phone while making a call. Oh, and no writing messages, recording, or watching videos either. Plus, you can only use a single button or swipe of a finger to answer a call. So what's a driver to do? Alabama's hands-free driving law is in effect. Follow it.
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. One of the big issues, Josh, of this past week was the court hearing the Tommy Tuberville residency case. As you and I both have written, this is a situation that no matter how Judge Brooke Reed rules, this is headed to the Supreme Court. And it is up to the Supreme Court to uphold the Constitution. This is bigger than Tommy Tuberville. This is bigger than one election. The question for the court is, does the Constitution mean what it says and say what it means when it says he has to have lived here 7 years next before the election? And, you know, you've really followed this. You know the players. What's your take, Josh?
Well, I think the biggest question is whether or not we are going to say that the court has a place in determining, that these things are upheld. Things in our Constitution are upheld in this particular instance. I can't think, and maybe there's some lawyers and folks out there who could tell you differently. I can't think of any other things that are included in our Constitution in which a court cannot enforce them. I don't know of any other requirements that are listed in our Constitution in which if someone in public office or public service or in the government or a citizen was going to break those things or violate those things in some way, that a court would not have any say-so in upholding them and enforcing those things to be done. But that's essentially what lawyers for Tommy Tuberville are arguing. And look, let's be fair to Joe Espy, who is his attorney. He's a fantastic attorney. I've known Joe and his family for a long time, and they're great attorneys. I think the argument that they're making is a unique argument, as is the folks on the other side, Barry Ragsdale and those guys that are arguing against this. There is no precedent for this in terms of a governor as to whether or not the courts have a role in upholding this. And so I think personally, this is one of those rare cases where a court is going to be able to set first precedent in a situation. And I personally think, no matter, and you're right, has nothing to do with Tommy Tuberville. Look, Tommy Tuberville and I don't agree, and I don't want Tommy Tuberville to be governor. That's that simple. Okay, but I've not wanted other people to be governor. I wanted Walt Maddox to be governor over Kay Ivey. Okay, so that's just the way that it is. I've been okay with Kay Ivey. She's been a pretty good governor. And hopefully Tommy Tuberville, if he gets that opportunity, he will be as well. But what I think is most important here is exactly what you said. We have a situation where we have to determine whether a court can uphold the Constitution right now. Right. And I think that's what they're looking at.
And I think, Susan, when the Constitution speaks, if the court can't answer, then the words in the Constitution are nothing more than window dressing or decorations. They don't have any force if a court can't rule on them.
No, absolutely. I mean, we look to the courts. We just discussed our citizenry, birthright citizenship that was decided by the court. I mean, we look to the courts. That's why they're there, is for us to take these types of issues, constitutional issues, and say, what is the law on this? How does this sit? How do we maneuver through this situation? That's what the courts are for.
And look, I mean, uncharted territory is where they say we're at, right? Uncharted territory. Mm-hmm. That's what courts have to navigate when they're calling balls and strikes a lot of times for such issues. 50 years ago in South Carolina, was a little more than 50 years ago, they had the same issue. They had a popular primary. They had a primary election. A very popular Democrat won that election, and all of a sudden, he was challenged on his residency, even though he had lived in South Carolina, was born in South Carolina. He said his heart was in South Carolina. He loved South Carolina. The Democratic Party was the majority party back then, and they supported him. But the court looked at the facts of whether he met the citizen residency requirements of the state of state of South Carolina, and they booted him off the ballot. And it did cause confusion. It did cause a lot of people to be upset and heartache. But they did the right thing because they honored the Constitution more than their party. These would have all been Democrats.
Right. And one of the first things you do as governor is swear an allegiance to the Constitution. So how can you swear an allegiance to a document you just violated?
Well, Josh, that's a pretty damn good point.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point, and it. But again, like I said, it's one of it's that question. What they're arguing is that this determination of the Constitution should only be upheld by the three qualifications that we have for being governor, which is you got to be 30 years old, you got to be a U.S. citizen, and you have to have lived in the state of Alabama for the previous 7 years prior to the election. All right, those are the only three. That's it. So now the question is, all right, let's say he's, as one of the attorneys pointed out in the hearing the other day, let's say they think he's 28 years old. Are you going to say that no court can force him to show his ID, his birth certificate, and say that he's 30? Right. I mean, that we're just going to wait until after the election for it to go to the legislature, because what they're arguing is only the parties up till this point have the authority to do so, and then afterwards only the legislature can hear a case against him. I've got to believe that there has to be a court of law somewhere that can hear a challenge to a candidate's eligibility. I just think that there has to be.
And what Josh just said sounds like home cooking.
And I will say this, candidate Tuberville, Coach Tuberville, all his people, this is not about you for me. This is about the rule of law. It is not to help Doug Jones. It is not to help the Democratic Party. It is nothing more than the rule of law in Alabama must have meaning. Now, we see lawless politicians all the time, and we report on them because lawlessness destroys republics. And so that's what we're calling for here, is for the courts to do their job. The Constitution is calling you. Will you answer? We're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching The V. We'll be right back.
Your property is your home, your investment, and your legacy. Across the country, scammers are filing fraudulent deeds, often without the owner knowing until it's too late. REACT is a free alert system. If a document is filed using your name or tied to your property, you'll be notified within 24 hours.
Property fraud is a crime, and the faster we know it, the faster we can act.
Sign up today. Protect your property, protect your legacy.
Alabama has a hands-free driving law, and that means you can't hold your mobile phone while making a call. Oh, and no writing messages, recording, or watching videos either. Plus, you can only use a single button or swipe of a finger to answer a call. So what's a driver to do? Alabama's hands-free driving law is in effect. Follow it.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. A new group, a coalition of jurors, former judges, former lawmakers, current activists, and a group of people have called, the group is called We the Jury. And one of the leaders of that group is Dick Brubaker, former Republican senator, a really smart, super conservative guy, but he knows wrong when he sees it. And what they are asking is that Governor Ivey grant clemency to all the people that are on death row who were put there by judicial override. And Susan, right now, that's about 25 people are sitting on death row, and they were put there because a judge overruled a jury that said give them life in prison without possibility of parole, but the judge said no, give them the death sentence. Now, in 2017, Alabama passed a law that said judicial override is bad law. But we're going to put people to death under bad law. And this group says, that's wrong, Governor Ivey. You signed this law, now grant clemency, which means they go back to the life in prison without the possibility of
Exactly.
parole.
That's a very important point. You said clemency. This does not mean they will release these prisoners.
No.
This means that it will go back to what the jury actually decided. Why they didn't make it retroactive makes absolutely no sense. And this issue came up this last week in a judicial override. Really, if judicial override was so fair, why do we need a jury? And one of the stories that I heard that a person that's involved with this group was on a jury that gave a life sentence to a defendant, and later learned that it had been overruled by the judge and had given him, and got so upset. He's like, well, why did I even waste my time being on the jury? So that this group of people is really committed. I mean, we've got 25 prisoners sitting on death row because of this. Well, I mean, it's nothing for her to, in her right conscience, if it's not fair now, it wasn't fair then.
Right. I mean, Josh, those sentences were passed and they were handed down in the past, but we're going to execute them today when that law is unconstitutional according to Alabama law.
Yeah, I don't understand why there was such a pushback when they were trying to do this in the legislature to making this retroactive. I don't understand why there's such a pushback among people today when you want to do this. I really don't. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense to me what we're talking about. I mean, you have a jury there, and everybody talks about, oh, we got to honor the jury's verdict. We got to honor what the jury says, and then we disregard it in this one instance when we have this individual who may be pushed one way or the other based upon his own personal, and professional ambition, because we elect our judges. And I think it's just, I don't know. To me, it's a real travesty that we have these people sitting on death row right now. And look, I get some of them have committed horrible crimes, and nobody's advocating for them to be set free. Okay,
No.
Nobody's advocating for that. We're advocating for them to have the sentence that the jury recommended.
And here's the math on this. From 1981 to 2015, there were 101 judicial overrides. We've got 25 still sitting on death row. Do the math. We've executed right around 75, 76 based on judicial override since that time.
And Alabama was the last state to do away with judicial override. There were only a couple of states that ever even had it because, as Josh said, we in America believe in the jury system. And I think it was the Equal Justice Initiative, one of the greatest groups that exist in the nation, and especially in Alabama, who calculated that these things happen most often near election time, Josh. So there was a political motive. I think many of them, there was a political motivation.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely they are. They're absolutely political motivations. You don't want people to come back and have, I honestly, I don't even really know at this point in time. I mean, if I could just get people to understand who their representatives are, I feel like we're doing a good job. The fact that that somebody out there is saying, oh my God, this judge didn't override this. I mean, I don't know that anybody's drilling down to that anymore. But it's ridiculous. I mean, some of these folks, the jury heard this. The jury sat there. You asked citizens to come in and commit their time to serving on a jury. You tell them it's their duty. It's their duty to do these things. It's their duty to behave and listen to all the facts and then weigh them and then present an accurate assessment of the trial in their verdict and in their sentence. And they've done so. And then you dishonor that by one person who heard the same thing the jury did. Okay. He heard all the same stuff that the jury heard. And he comes in over the top of that when he clearly, or she, has an other motivation that could be a factor in these things. And I just think that's wrong.
Well, and I think Dick Brubaker, former Senator Dick Brubaker, is a serious man. And I believe when he's on a mission, he's going to.
I do believe, and memory serves, and I could be totally wrong, but I believe he was one of the senators that helped stop the judicial override.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but it just kind of.
He wants to get clemency. We only got about a minute left, but I do want to talk about, turnout is going to be everything in this next election cycle. Mm-hmm. We don't expect the state to turn blue, but the NAACP and a lot of Black activists and Democratic groups are taking this very seriously, Josh, and they are organizing like we have not seen them organize in 20 years.
Yeah, it's great to see. It's fantastic to see, because the one thing, listen, this group is great because, I agree with most of what they do politically. Okay. So I know that this is great for me and my people. But to me, anything that furthers participation in election, no matter who you are, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, anything that bumps those numbers from the low 20s where we're at up into, I would love to see 95% participation. And if we could get something along those lines and get a true vote from people and get people involved in this thing and let them understand how much of a difference they can make in their communities, man, we would have such a different society and we would be so much better off, and we could stop a lot of this nonsense that's happening.
Right there, you've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.